5. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you today. We got a lot to talk about. We've been getting a lot done today, right? And, let's talk about the Trump defamation lawsuit. What does that mean for corporate media, legacy media? And, got a little something to say about that. So I want to hear from you. Hey, Shalom, Robert. That's right, the third hour. Actually, it's like the fourth or something. Yeah, I've been doing. I had Sabby Sabs on at the beginning of the morning. Then I was off for an hour and a half, and now we're back with Jim Narekas of Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. Everybody, please meet me on Blue Sky at Santita Jackson. Thank you, Jim, for joining me at Santita Jackson. BSKY.social, and then X, which people are leaving, but I'm still there at Santita J, and the Santita Jackson Show, and of course the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Robert and so many people over there. Everybody, thumbs up, like the show, share. And please go to the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. Whew. Okay. Jim, it's a whole lot. But what? I have to tell you, I've got a lot of thoughts about this. Let me go from, if you don't mind.
Sure.
ABC, what is it? ABC News. But let me go to CNN. ABC News will pay $15 million to a presidential foundation and museum in a settlement reached with President-elect Donald Trump and ABC News in his defamation suit against the network and anchor George Stephanopoulos. The settlement, which was filed publicly on Saturday, reveals the network will also pay $1 million in Trump's attorney's fees and will issue an apology. They will issue George Stephanopoulos kept asserting that Trump was found guilty of rape civilly, and that is not true. And when I've corrected people on this show, people have gotten upset with me. They called me a Trump apologist. I said, no. One thing that I want to do is state things accurately. I would never, ever take the violation of people, anybody, in some cavalier fashion. But whatever the charges are, state them factually. You got to be very careful. When you have this microphone, it's a very, very powerful instrument. And I think that you are obligated to be truthful, even and especially when it's someone you might not like. It really doesn't matter whether you like them or not. It really comes down to being ethical. So you tell me, because this is what you measure. What is the lawsuit? What happened? I'm just giving you just like a portion of what they said on CNN and on all of these legacy media outlets. But you can see it's left legacy media a little shook. Everybody's saying that they kissed the ring. How do you see it?
Well, I think that there is. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. Let me preface, but in my opinion, as a media observer, I do not think there's any way that ABC would have lost this case had they taken it to court. The issue was that Stephanopoulos had said that Trump had been found liable for rape, and in fact, he'd been found liable for sexual assault. And there's a distinction made in New York law between rape and sexual assault.
Yeah.
As the judge in the case has said, the actions for which Trump was found liable for would meet many people's personal understanding of what rape means, but they don't. It doesn't meet the New York State legal definition of rape. And so you start with the fact that ABC is paying $15 million for the difference between liable for rape and liable for sexual assault. Now, if you can find me a jury that says that there's $15 million worth of reputational damage between being liable for rape and liable for sexual assault, I think you're a damn good lawyer. This is on top of the fact that Trump is a public official, a public figure. He's the most public figure as a once a future president, probably the most recognizable person on television, and so he would be required to prove in a court of law that not only was the statement that Stephanopoulos made false, but it had to be made with reckless disregard for the truth, which is the definition of malice under the law. And public officials have this higher burden because the courts recognize that in order to protect the First Amendment, in order to protect the ability for people to comment on public affairs, on people in the public eye, you cannot have any slip of the tongue be punished under the laws under the rule of libel, and so it's a very high burden. You have to show that Stephanopoulos did not care what the difference was between rape and sexual assault, and was making this claim without any understanding. He didn't care. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing in the public record, at least, to indicate that there was anything like that. There's any comments from Stephanopoulos indicating that he or anyone at ABC that they didn't care what the truth was about Donald Trump. And so given the high burden that Trump would have to reach, both in proving that this was made with reckless disregard, that it in fact was in a legal sense factually untrue, given the fact that the judge in the case says that many people would understand what Trump did as being equivalent to rape. And finally, the idea that he would have to prove damages, that his reputation was damaged by this statement, as opposed to the more legally accurate statement of libel for sexual assault. It's really a legal mountain that Trump would have to climb. And rather than making him climb that mountain, ABC, Disney, said, "Here's $50 million for your presidential library. Can we please be forgiven?" I think this is not a legal decision on the part of ABC. I don't think it's a journalistic decision on the part of ABC. I think it's a political decision on the part of ABC. I think they are aware that Donald Trump is someone who takes pride in rewarding his friends and punishing his enemies. And as we go into a second Trump era, I think that ABC would rather be on Trump's friend list than on Trump's enemies list.
Can you distinguish this for me? You said it wasn't a legal decision, and understanding I'm not a lawyer, neither are you. But you said it was. I
don't mean it's an illegal decision. I mean it's
not
a decision made on the legal.
Right. Yeah. No. I wasn't. Please don't want you to infer that, because I certainly didn't imply that. I was trying to parse out what you meant by the fact that you said no, this wasn't journalistic. Okay, why wasn't it a journalistic decision? Why was it a political decision?
I think that as a journalist, you as the leader of a journalistic organization, you want to have the back of your employees, of the journalists who work for you. You want people to be able to make statements in a journalistic setting without constantly looking over their shoulder, worrying that a slip of the tongue is going to ruin them financially. The journalists need to feel like they have the support of their institution, which is not to say, people should first. It is important to be accurate. When inevitably mistakes are made in journalism, you should own up to them. You should retract them. But paying $50 million for this what is essentially a slip of the tongue is a cave-in on the part of ABC that is sending a message to all of ABC's employees that your employer does not have your back. Your employer is going to, if you make a slip like this, they're not going to defend you to the extent that the law allows. They're essentially going to hang you out to dry.
But you know what? I didn't see it as a slip because he said it like 8 or 9 times in the course of the interview. I mean, the corporate media shape narratives. And when you're in Europe and in the United States, there's a difference between rape, which is intercourse without consent, and sexual assault really comes down to touching without consent. It's all wrong, right? But
we had an impeachment of a president in the 1990s over the question of what sex was, and Bill Clinton did not have intercourse with Monica Lewinsky.
Mm-hmm.
And in his mind, he was not. He was answering accurately when he said, "I did not have sex with that woman,"
Mm-hmm.
because
he said sexual relations.
And I don't think many people thought, well, he had a point there. Technically, he wasn't, actually penetrating Monica Lewinsky, and therefore, I think that people saw that as a technical evasion and not as a real serious moral distinction.
Well, you know what? Can I tell you on the black side of town?
Sure.
We knew he was not telling the truth. And so everybody went, oh, okay. So what does this have to do with policy? Right. I'm just keeping it 100 with you. And so people were like, yeah, right. And also, my mother wouldn't let me go become a Senate page because she said, when you get into power, and I'm going to bring up David Gibbs before you go, Dr. Gibbs, in a hot second, power gives people that, what did Lincoln say? If you want to test a man's character, first give him power. It gives people an opportunity to do all kinds of things that they want to do, but they might not have the space to do with less means. And so for me, for me, when I kept hearing him say rape, I said, no, it wasn't rape, it was sexual assault. And I'm very sensitive to that. Maybe because we've lived in public life and, there are distinctions. And, they were making it, I've heard people call him a rapist. I'm like, no, rape and sexual assault are different things. And if you don't believe it, go to Europe. Now, mind you, our laws are different, but there is a difference. And I wasn't surprised by George Stephanopoulos. I just felt that he was following, if you will, a party line. And, and I said, no, don't do that. Be very, very careful. Not about what you say. I would say that about someone who is completely unknown. Because I just don't want to be on the other end, and because we've been on the other end of people saying things about us that were just not true. And I'm not saying that something didn't happen in that dressing room, although that was all bizarre to me. But I think that you're right. I think that they don't want to be on Trump's bad side. But quite frankly, that is the way power works. It's not just Trump, Jim. Folks get you back when they get in power. Everybody does that.
Mark Zuckerberg is giving $1 million to Trump's inauguration.
Yeah.
Not because he thinks that, not because he supports the policies of Donald Trump, and I don't think because he would give $1 million to any presidential nomination inauguration just because he thinks he's an inauguration fan or something. I think he's giving $1 million to Donald Trump because he is aware that Trump has elevated the principle of retribution to a sacrament. It's the first when he gives a list of what they don't teach you in business school that you need to know to succeed. His first rule is to get back at people.
Yeah.
That is what he says is the first thing you ought to know when you go into business, and the ability to punish your enemies and reward your friends is very great, especially with Trump's plan to put crushing tariffs on some of our largest trading partners. The president has the ability to make exceptions. It's really a huge amount of power. It was given to the president almost a century ago, many decades ago, because it was thought that Congress was too corrupt and would be making deals if you let Congress set tariffs, and so it was given to the president. But Trump can say, there's going to be this huge tariff, but not for this particular company and not for that company. It's a gigantic power that he did use in his previous term. The tariffs were much lower for businesses that supported Trump than they were for businesses that did not support Trump. That lesson has gotten through, and is something that Disney is well aware of. Disney is a company that does depend on merchandise as well as on media, and so the tariffs do very much impact the Disney business. The theme park business is already very much under the gun because of Disney's rough relations with the Florida governor, who's on Team Trump, and so it doesn't that doesn't help the situation. I feel like they thought that $50 million was a fairly small price to pay to avoid being on a collision course with a president who has this sweeping power to dole out favors and punishments.
Well, if he names a wing after them in his library, I think yes, I will say that
the Stephanopoulos wing. Yeah.
What's your final word before you go?
I feel like we are in need of critical reporting on the president as never before. The proposals that Trump has made are dramatic. They're sweeping. The idea of rounding up and deporting, upwards of 10 million people. It's a human displacement on the level of the Japanese internment or the Trail of Tears, and
or Katrina.
Yeah. The importance of turning a critical eye on the president is so great right now, and if you get the sense that instead of being willing to be an oppositional press, that the press is trying to get the favor of the president, I think we're all in trouble.
Well, Welcome to the Terror Dome. I think we've been in trouble for a long time. I mean,
Yes.
look at what Facebook does. I mean, none of this stuff is clean. And unfortunately, I think we're now seeing it.
Yeah.
Jim Narekas, Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. It's always a joy to be with you. I depend upon you and Janine Jackson and the team at FAIR to help me make sense of this craziness. It is so crazy. But you know what? The quiet part's being said out loud. You guys, you hear me say it all the time. Hey, Cynthia. Hey, Shalom, Robert. I, I think it's just it's a sign of the times.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Prince. I knew that would come in handy someday. Blessings to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Santita.
All righty.
Bye.
Hey, Dr. David Gibbs, grading those papers. Oh, my goodness. I need you to turn up your mic so I can hear you.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Great. Now I can. Yep.
Right.
Well, say hello to Jim.
Hi, I'm bowing out.
Okay. Well, and of course, his book is What the Revolt of the Rich. And they're not just revolting. What is it? Elon Musk gave $277 million to the campaign. He is now 200 billion with a B dollars richer. And now, but I ask you today to talk about, to help me to make sense from an historical perspective of what's happened with ABC News and the president. We've been talking, for years about what did Dwight McKee say? Don't turn a monster into a martyr. And it happens all the time. I've seen those interviews and I watch these shows, Dr. Gibbs, just to take the pulse, and to kind of see how the narrative is being shaped, right? And what they're saying. I don't depend upon them to shape my opinion. I want to hear where they're going with it, right? And I know enough about law to know that there's a difference between sexual assault and rape. A criminal conviction and a civil conviction. I think you all need to be clear on that. For example, Julian Assange was charged with sexual assault in Sweden. Not rape in the sense that we see it. It's touching. And that's what it means over here. I'm not making excuses for anybody. I'm just saying that when I heard George Stephanopoulos say this over civilly, and he got the civil right, rape wrong. He kept saying it. I said, he shouldn't do that. And he knows what he's doing. He's reinforcing the narrative that he's a rapist. He was not charged with that. And he was not found guilty of that. I'm not an apologist, you guys. I'm just saying that I believe in fairness. It's just me. Maybe, and if I'm by myself, I am. But what do you make of this? Because more and more, people are not looking at legacy media, so-called corporate media. They're just saying, you know what, you guys, I do not trust you. I don't trust you. So help me. Help me to make sense of this from, give me the top-down view, if you will.
Right. I'll deal with the narrow specific issue and then with the larger issue, as you want me to in a historical context. The narrow issue is that there was a judgment in court against Trump for, I think the term was sexual abuse, or maybe it was sexual assault. I don't remember the exact wording. Against Trump on behalf of a woman named Jean Carroll. And it was decided based on the preponderance of the evidence. This was not a criminal proceeding, so it was the preponderance of the evidence, not guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And he engaged in behavior which in New York state law, where it occurred, was not considered rape. It was considered something lesser than rape. So I think the term, again, was either sexual abuse or sexual assault. I don't remember which one. And George Stephanopoulos repeatedly said on the air that Trump was found to have committed rape, which under New York law is not accurate. Now, I should add that, let me say, I personally think he should not have said that, particularly he should not have said it multiple times. He should have been more precise in his wording, although there are people in academia, whom I know personally, who would insist what Trump did to the woman, what he was found to have done to the woman, in their view, would constitute rape, not in a legal sense, but in a larger moral sense. So The bottom line is that the press has become very polemical. It has become very much an active party to conflict. They've dropped any pretense of neutrality or objectivity, which I think is a bad thing. But nevertheless, the press has become activist against Trump for the most part. And I'd rather just the press report the facts and try and be as neutral as possible. That's the better way to do it. I think academia should be that way too, because I think that's the best way they can serve the public. But nevertheless, we do have this adversarial relationship between Trump and the legacy media. And speaking polemically, Stephanopoulos accused him of rape, even if that was, in my view, an overstatement. Personally, I don't think it was that big a deal on Stephanopoulos' part. Again, given the fact that there are people, educated people, who in their view would insist what Trump did was rape. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there. I think the larger issue for me is the way in which defamation law can be used to silence dissent, and that does worry me. There's a long tradition whereby the very powerful will threaten defamation suits against anyone who criticizes them. Now, the standard we have, I'll be specific with regard to this case. I'm very surprised that ABC settled this for $15 million for this reason, that in court we have, there's a dual standard, and the dual standard is for public figures and non-public figures. If you go and say something, the bottom line is, in a court of law, the truth is a complete defense. If you can prove what you said is true, it's a complete defense. Now, in this case, it wasn't strictly true, because under New York state law, Trump did not commit rape. So therefore, what Stephanopoulos said wasn't really accurate. So in that sense, well, he was not saying the truth, all right? On the other hand, there is a principle that for public figures, it is not enough to win a defamation case involving a public figure. You have to prove actual malice. In other words, in a court of law, if it went to court, Trump would have to prove not only that what Stephanopoulos said was false, which I guess it was, but that Stephanopoulos knew it was false, but kept saying it, knowing it was false. And it's not exactly clear to me that he obviously knew it was false at the time he was saying it. He might have decided that in a common vocabulary definition, what he was saying was true, and you could make a case it was true. So I doubt it would meet the very high standards required to win a defamation case for a public figure. And again, if anybody's a public figure, surely a former president's a public figure. The bottom line, again, we have a double standard here, a correct double standard, which is that if you defame an ordinary Joe or Jill, who's not a public figure, whether you intended to defame them or not, if what you said is false, you lose the case and you have to pay damages. But if you're talking about a public figure, you have to prove in court that the person making the defamation knew what they were saying was false and proceeded anyway. All right. That was not the case here, as I understand it. Again, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm speaking as a layperson, but I do know a little bit about defamation law because, to be frank, I was threatened with defamation suits twice by powerful people. And so I have looked up the matter. Okay. And so that's the standard. The problem we have here is that for reasons I don't fully understand, ABC decided to settle the matter rather than going to court and winning, which is what I assumed they would have done. And why they did that, I don't know. Maybe, as Jim Norikis said, they were trying to be conciliatory with Donald Trump, given that he's about to become president of the United States, and they don't want to get on the bad side of a man about to become president. So it could be just political. All right. Either way, it's a bad precedent, because what it establishes is that it's going to be very difficult to criticize powerful people now because of this precedent. And the precedent is that person can more easily shut you down. All right. And that worries me. That worries me a lot. The reason is that we have to have broad ability to criticize the powerful. Again, I'm not talking about, there's a question of punching up or punching down. Punching down is different, but if you're criticizing, generals or billionaires or former presidents, you should be allowed to get a little bit rough with them, and we have to have broad leeway to do that, or we can't really have freedom of speech, and that's a real problem here. Generally speaking, the very powerful often try to misuse defamation law precisely for that purpose, to shut down criticism. I'll just give you an anecdote. When I was in graduate school doing a dissertation, I was doing political science at MIT. I was looking at the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the CIA in the Congo, things involving, for example, the assassination of Patrice Lumumba.
Mm.
And I was dealing very heavily with a very, very powerful diamond trader who was very close to the CIA, who was deeply involved in the operations. And I had a great deal of information about him. And he found out about my research, and he sent a letter to MIT that, in essence, threatened MIT with a lawsuit, or threatened me with a lawsuit, a defamation lawsuit, unless presumably MIT would retract my dissertation. It didn't explicitly say that, but that was a strong implication, let's put it that way. MIT responded by saying, "This is our lawyer. You have anything to say about this, you say it to our lawyer." In other words, they're giving me legal support, right? Which meant I could go ahead with it. I mean, if I didn't have legal support, it would have been very intimidating, because the person I'm talking about here, the diamond trader, has access to very powerful attorneys, and they can harass you and tie you up in court in a way that can ruin you financially, especially for a graduate student who had no money. And so this is the risk we have here. And this is a decision like this by ABC to settle for $15 million in a case where there wasn't actual malice, or there's no evidence that I'm aware of actual malice. So it's a very bad precedent. It'll make it much easier for powerful people, not just Trump, but any powerful person, to go after graduate students in the future and intimidate them into not criticizing the powerful. And we need to be able to hold the powerful accountable. Again, not just Trump, but all powerful people. And defamation law can be misused this way. And so I'm very worried about the precedent this sets.
Well, you know, and I absolutely agree with you, because I think it's dangerous for us not to be able to dissent, for us not to be able to ask questions, to challenge, not just speak to the powerful, but to challenge them. You have power that I have vested in you, and so I'm supposed to hold you accountable, because that power actually is mine, and we forget that. I've given you my power to do my bidding, and the president is my employee. I mean, and we forget that. We've deified these people, all of them, and that is to our detriment.
Yeah.
But I also know the power of the press, and I know that there is science. There's a science to all of this, right? And I think about how the press went after Dr. King, and I know I bring up Dr. King all the time, but my parents worked for him, and I grew up with that. It's just part of my legacy. I grew up with a press that had an adversarial relationship with my father, and with so many people who I knew who were fighting to end injustice in the world, right? And so I see them, and I know when they're shaping a narrative. And Dr. Gibbs, there have been so many people who I would read about them in the newspapers, and they were these horrible people. And then you met them and you were like, this is such a lovely person. I'm like, what is this? And I know that when you continue to call someone a rapist, you're setting the narrative in my head. And so then we all say that. And I'm just very, very sensitive to, wait a minute, no, there's a difference between sexual assault and rape. There is. And you all need to be sensitive to that, because I bet you, I tell you this, if they did that to George Stephanopoulos, we'd all get corrected on every ABC platform, because he's their golden boy and they would protect him.
Yeah.
They would not let you say that about him. Don Imus made some remark about a story that has been out here on Joe Scarborough for many, many years. And because he said something that cast aspersion upon him, even though these things did happen, he never was on Joe Scarborough's show again. And that show that he had on MSNBC was short-lived. Because you put something in the public square that could be a stain on someone's character. And I guess I'm always, whether you like someone or not, I'm just like, wait a minute. George Stephanopoulos, you worked for Bill Clinton. You were with him in times good and bad. I've met him a few times. I like him, but I didn't like that. And I said, stop that. Don't say that, because that is not. He was not found guilty of that.
I
Simply,
agree. I mean, I agree with you certainly that George Stephanopoulos should not have said rape if that's not what the court said, and that was not what the court said. So he was wrong to say that. There is also an issue of the press smearing people in some cases, and not just Trump, but smearing, for example, as you mentioned, Martin Luther King and Reverend Jesse Jackson, and others.
and Fred Hampton.
Yeah, Fred. Oh, yeah, definitely, Fred. Absolutely, Fred Hampton. In other words, sometimes you get people oppositional figures, public figures certainly, but nevertheless oppositional figures not representing the powerful, and they regularly get smeared in the press. It happens all the time,
Yeah.
and that is a danger. And defamation law should be around to protect them against certain kinds of smears. The risk is that if you take defamation law too far, it can shut down people who themselves are trying to challenge the powerful as well. And so it has to strike a balance here. And I think the balance should be struck in favor of a very limited defamation law, because I see a much greater risk of the powerful using defamation law to shut down criticism. And although admittedly, again, there's a tension here, and I'm not denying there's a risk of smears. And again, not just smears against people like Donald Trump, who honestly I don't have a lot of sympathy for personally, but people who are of higher moral character than he is.
Because I would take him out of it. To me,
agree.
just, you can just put X.
Yeah.
He's just a variable to me.
Absolutely.
I'm always asking about, okay, just insert this person here, someone I like. I would say, whoa, wait. He wasn't found guilty of that. Because someone's going to have a bad moment, blah, blah, blah. No, just that's my concern.
It is. I mean, another country that basically has a much more, shall we say, liberal defamation law is Britain, at least historically they have. It may have changed that recently, I'm not sure. But historically, Britain it was much easier for powerful people to win defamation cases against critics. And they did it quite regularly. And it was a real impediment on public discussion in Britain and on investigative journalism. And I think the American system, which basically makes it much more difficult to win defamation cases in court, is better in that respect. Even though there's a problem there, because again, it allows a certain amount of smearing to go on unchallenged. But I'm much more worried about cases like this one, where basically because ABC decided to settle this and pay $15 million, it'll make it more difficult for critics to challenge the powerful in the future, for fear that something like that could happen to them, and they may work for a company that doesn't have $15 million, and so this could be a real risk, I think.
But let me just ask you this, because I wasn't aware of what had happened with you in this particular case, and many people, I think, they don't understand the tremendous wealth in Africa and the Congo. I mean, it's the richest continent on earth. It is.
Yeah, there's no doubt that was one of the major reasons various countries were intervening in the Congo during this time, why the CIA was interested. No doubt about that.
And we're talking about Patrice Lumumba 60 years after his death, because he was an incredible figure. I mean, just side note, when Dave Chappelle ran away to Africa, he went there. And people don't know his parents. He's from a family of very esteemed educators. And when they had the revolution in the Congo, Patrice Lumumba reached out to his parents and brought them over to start their education system. Such was his esteem for Dave Chappelle's parents. He said, "No, I'm the only one in my family who doesn't have a degree." I mean, they're very, 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 very well, very highly esteemed family in the world of education, and certainly in the Black community. But what did that, if MIT had not, if MIT said, you know what, you got a problem, what would that have done to you? What would that have done to your research, your career?
Probably I would have basically changed my dissertation and removed the diamond trader, is what I would have to do. I might add that the diamond trader, I think it found one or two very minor errors, which I subsequently corrected, but the real thing he wanted, I suspect, I mean, he didn't say this, what he wanted was to remove any mention of him, or certainly any, since almost all the information I had was unflattering to him, I certainly wanted me to remove everything about him. And he was a significant player in this affair. He was very close. He eventually hired the former chief of station of the CIA, who was deeply involved in the events that led to Lumumba's death. I'm not aware the demonstrator himself was involved in the death. I'm not aware of that, but the CIA certainly had some role in making it possible.
Mhm.
And that's been documented by numerous sources. And the I would have had to remove the information about the diamond trader, is my guess. If MIT did not come forward and say, "This is our lawyer, talk to our lawyer," and I would have had to basically defend myself on my own. I couldn't have done that. I just would have had to cave to what this man wanted me to do.
Do you think this is going to happen here? Because Bernadette says this sounds like the beginning of a dictatorship. And
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I don't like overstating, but there's no doubt there's an anti-democratic aspect to a lot of what's been going on in this country lately, from both directions, from both parties. And I do fear, basically, that an expansive use of defamation law to shut down criticism of Trump. Again, this is bipartisan, and it's not just the Republicans who are doing it, but in this case, it is Trump, basically. Trump is, if I'm not mistaken, Trump has repeatedly said things like he wants basically to make it easier to shut down criticism through defamation law. He wants to change defamation law. If I recall correctly, I think he did call for that. And so I think we are getting some very strong authoritarian tendencies in our political system here that are very worrying to me.
to worrying, I mean, how are they manifesting, in your opinion?
Well, a number of different ways. I mean, we are seeing, very authoritarian language coming from Trump, but also from the Democrats as well. We're seeing things like the intelligence services collaborating with tech companies to moderate speech, as they call it, on the internet, on social media. Matt Taibbi has documented this very carefully based on what he called the Twitter files, I think very convincingly.
Wait, he was in Congress during this administration.
That's right, during the Biden.
In Congress, and the IRS was raiding his house.
That's right. That's right. Another act of authoritarianism. That's right. Misuse of the IRS for political purposes.
I mean, while he was on camera testifying before Congress, they were raiding his home.
That's right. And so, this is we're in an authoritarian atmosphere, and I would like to say it's only one side that's doing it, but that's not the case. Both sides are using authoritarian means to get their way.
Do you think that we should be looking, because I just came across this last night, and of course I got like an hour of sleep because I'd seen this, just a little hint of it somewhere, but I've always had questions about Elon Musk because he is South African and he grew up in an apartheid South Africa.
Oh yeah.
But so did Peter Thiel. I mean, that whole gaggle of
Peter Thiel did. I didn't know that. I didn't know that about
Yeah.
Peter.
He's German, and absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's several of them. They all were between South Africa and Namibia, which was, since Southern Africa was. It was Southern Africa. It wasn't just South Africa, everybody. It was Southern Africa. It was South Africa and the frontline states that were apartheid states.
Yes.
And they come from that. And in fact, I want to talk about this one day. And I'm going to try and find this young woman, but I want to bring you on with her as well. When he was at Stanford, it was at the height of the anti-apartheid movement. And one of his fellow students, she was 18, she said, and so she said, with great trepidation, I knocked on his door because I had heard that he said apartheid was not bad. It was profitable. And she said, so I went to ask him about it. And she said, I was nervous because you all have to understand, when Jewish people see a Nazi, they're filled with trepidation. When I see a white supremacist, I feel the same way. And particularly when I look at what was happening in South Africa at the time, so many people, the ANC used to stay at our home when they come to Chicago. And so many people we knew were getting killed.
Yeah.
And so it was just a very, very, and I mean, he control. I mean, Palantir, X. These people control social media.
Yep.
I mean, and no one asks about their background. So when we're looking at this authoritarianism, and you've got key people in the administration and in our, and who are really helping to run our lives, they come from apartheid South Africa, and no one is talking about it.
That's true. No, it is very surprising. I agree.
I'm gonna say. I mean, for me, I'm like, there's no more authoritarian a place and space than South Africa. I mean, just even if you just stay with Elon Musk, and no one asks him,
Yeah.
well, what was it like for you to grow up in apartheid South Africa? What lessons did you learn? What did you think about it? What do you think about it now?
Right.
No one's asking any of that. And I certainly can't ask it on X.
Well, you might try on X. I don't know if he would. He claims to be a free speech enthusiast. I mean, I have doubts about that. I mean,
What do you think?
I don't think so. I think he's interested in making billions of dollars. That's what I think. I don't think he's a principled person. I work on the assumption that he's not. And so I wouldn't take very seriously his claims to be a free speech purist, as he likes to say. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he's already given in to pressure by the Brazilian government to engage in censorship at their behest. So he's certainly hasn't been very consistent about that. He's always put his bottom line first, as you'd expect somebody who's as rich as he is to do. So I don't think we should have any fantasies about Musk.
How do you think they will shape the conversation? I mean,
well, there's no doubt they have a lot of power. He certainly has Trump's ear, particularly Musk does. Thiel was, of course, a mentor to J.D. Vance. And so through J.D. Vance, I assume he has significant influence in the administration. I don't have specifics on that, but again, his connections to J.D. Vance is a matter of record.
Oh, he put J.D. Vance in business, and he put him on the map.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, yes.
I mean, and they're just doing a lot of things. Not that I'm shocked by them, because I am not. But I see the corporate media doing a lot of misdirecting, and directing and misdirecting. They put our focus here, but I can't talk about Elon Musk's background or the background of Peter Thiel. You're not, and this nexus of South African apartheid.
Yeah.
And no one wants to talk about that. And so just as we're looking at this, I mean, I just have a couple more minutes here. What then do you think is our takeaway with this? I mean, because the decision has been made. Now you see Mark Zuckerberg, all these people falling in line. They're contributing to the Jeff Bezos is on his way to Trump. This is business.
It's business. That's right. I'm not surprised about it. I think, generally speaking, these are people whose religion, whose politics is money, and they can see what is in their interest, and they're going to have to make some amends with regard to their relationship towards Trump, and that's exactly what they're doing. And it should not come as a surprise to anybody. It's affecting reporting. In this case, I think it is a nefarious result. In this case, in that it does raise questions about maybe an expansion of the ability of the powerful to shut down discussion. And that, as I said, is a very bad precedent. And it looks to me like this is not just a legal question. My guess is that if this had gone to court, I assume it would have been thrown out of court. But what ABC was doing was trying to appease Donald Trump, the next president. I assume it was more political than legal. Because I don't think Trump really had a legal case here, because you'd have to show actual malice. That's a very high standard. And that's very difficult to prove in a court of law. I doubt he could have proven that. They might very well have had summary dismissal. Again, I'm speaking as a layperson, not as a lawyer. You better bring on one of the numerous lawyers you bring on and ask them that question, because my understanding is Trump didn't have a legal leg to stand on with regard to this case, and ABC caved remarkably quickly.
Well, I brought you on because you're an historian. And what's passed is prologue, and a lot of people are worried about what they feel could be the dictatorial aspects of this administration. I said, hey, we've already had um, a primary season canceled by the Democrats, and 14 million votes thrown out.
Yeah.
This has already happened. I mean, we're living in some dystopian world. I mean, and everyone is looking at Trump, and they're not looking at what's happening over here. The Democrats looked us in the eye, Dr. Gibbs, and they said, no, there will be no primary, and you can't ask it, and I'm not going to discuss it.
Yeah, there are definitely very disturbing tendencies in the Democratic Party that are, again, I don't know, dictatorial, but certainly oppressive, I guess I'd use the word.
Yeah.
McCarthyite, a very strong McCarthyite tendency in the Democratic Party. Any criticism of whole ranges of policy, especially foreign policy towards Russia, is instantly met with the claim that you're working for Vladimir Putin, you're working for a foreign enemy. That's very authoritarian. That's what they do in undemocratic states. That's what we did here, as everyone knows, in the 40s and 50s, and ruined people's reputations that way. And more importantly, shut down. I mean, to some extent, what they're trying to do is deceive the public. They're trying to keep the public from knowing information because they're intimidating debate. So the public can't hear the full range of debate. And the Democrats are doing this. They're taking a leaf from the Republican Party because traditionally the Republicans have used that technique. Now the Democrats are using it. So I don't really see either party here has a very strong claim to superior morality. I really do. I mean, I'm not a fan of the Democratic Party. I know people have criticized me on the show, perhaps rightly, perhaps wrongly, but I really do think I'm not seeing the Democrats are that much morally superior to the Republicans at this point in time.
No, not at all. They're the same. They're doing the same thing. They really are. That's my reason. People get upset with me. I hear you. It's just my opinion. But I'm seeing that, everybody, look, I grew up in Chicago under something called the Democratic Machine, which was raw authoritarianism.
Yeah.
The nickname for Richard Daley, our mayor, was Boss.
Yeah.
He was the strongest urban mayor in modern American history. And when Reverend Jackson ran for president, he had to run against the Democratic Party. They did everything they could to stop him. Okay, so and to kill his candidacy. They Super Tuesday they came up with after the 84 campaign because they couldn't believe that he made it through the campaign, let alone become a top tier candidate. They couldn't believe it. And then what ended up happening? Well, in 88, when he came up with Super Tuesday, he finished first and second, and Al Gore, the candidate they sent to us, had to get out. So, I mean, I've been telling you, I've seen this. And so when you jump on me, when you jump on Dr. Gibbs, look, you kind of step away and you have to be scientific about this. Because either we support that which is democratic and that which is fair, or we don't. It's just that simple. Final word from you.
I think we need to basically get back to the idea that we need open discussion and debate, and we shouldn't demonize open discussion and debate. And we shouldn't have a political structure where both parties are trying to think of all sorts of ways of shutting down debate and shutting down open discussion through oppressive means. And that's exactly what's happening. We should be very much aware of the fact we should set aside our tribalism and not just say, as many people do, that repressive actions, intimidation, shutting down a debate is okay if our side does it, but bad if the other side does it. We have to be consistent about that. And we should not just basically criticize. Today I've been criticizing Donald Trump for doing this, but I think we need to be very aware both sides do it.
Because when anybody does it, the whole process, the whole system is in danger. Right. I mean, it really is. The revolt of the rich, everybody. It's Christmas time. Put that book under your Christmas tree. Put it under your Christmas tree. If you want to know why we are where we are, the book explains it all. I'm telling you. Sending you so much love. Thank you for being with us today. And don't be too hard on your students.
Okay, I'll do my best.
AM 950 Radio, the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a moment.